915-544-KTSM, 915-544-5876, or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. People already tuning in, chiming in over there. Yes. Hope y'all had a wonderful 4th of July holiday, depending on how you slice it. If you had Monday off, congrats to you. I kind of did. Of course, we weren't on air because I actually had some other station duties. If you heard me on different stations, no, I wasn't playing hooky from y'all, just the way it ended up working out for those days. But otherwise, we do have a lot of stuff going on today. So we already got the Ida Beza Gardner and Angel Rueda, both with the high and the wave and the rock on, respectively. So thank you all for chiming in over there. And of course, one of the better ways you can do so throughout the program by adding your 2 cents over on the various social media platforms. Manda Mankanda, howdy as well, over there on the twitch.tv stream. To appreciate you chiming in that way. Again, however works for you. And yeah, we're on Twitter for the time being. Not that we have any problems with it, though it seems to be having its own, but that's a whole separate conversation. We're in all the places that we think we need to be anyway when it comes to getting the message out, having it available to you all, and being able to talk about the things that affect us here in the borderland, because there's quite a lot, including from that 4th of July holiday, why fireworks safety is no joke with the number of injuries and or fires being caused. So just don't act the fool out there, because I'm sure, as anyone who knows, that was not being allowed in the city limits of El Paso, though there were definitely some, it's called them intrepid individuals, testing the limits of that at their convenience. There's another way to say that phrase I'm not going to use on air. In any case, hope you all staying safe out there. And of course, a lot of very important and serious things going on in the borderland right now, including, believe it's wrapped up for the day, though it's a little bit hard to tell because the sentencing part of the trial for the now having been found guilty after his admission of guilt, August 3rd shooter, that now progressing in federal court here in El Paso. The reason it's going to be a little bit unclear about what's going on with that process at any given point is because federal trials work very differently. At the very least, the federal courthouse here in El Paso, and any federal courthouse, frankly, that I've done coverage on, has some very different requirements, abilities, tending towards a lack of permissiveness of information coming immediately out of the courtroom. That's the reason that some of the things that I've been seeing so far is sketches, and why that's most of what we're going to get. Though we do have some audio we're going to be bringing you today from outside of the courtroom from one of the victims' families on the progression so far, and of course the very emotional state of that. But of course, there's a lot of other things also going on here in the borderland, including the farewell to El Paso's now former city manager, Tommy Gonzalez, and what he had to say, particularly to El Paso Inc., about his time and what he said, and also, I guess, importantly, didn't say at various different points. So a lot going on today, a lot of things to be discussed, and again, a lot of audio that we're going to be working to bring on to here probably next segment. Have to get some bells and whistles figured out. But yeah, definitely a lot of important things, and a lot of things we're going to be talking about throughout the progression of the program here today. And just as a reminder, since we were off the previous couple of days, tomorrow we will be doing an interview as per usual, but then we'll still be doing Free for All Friday. So don't worry about that, even if it is a slightly compressed week, and then we'll be back on the regular schedule immediately afterwards. So let's just dive straight into it. And we are going to be having more audio, so we'll talk about this for a bit this segment. But yeah, first day of the federal sentencing hearing in El Paso. Walmart shooter Patrick Crusius, about the only time I'm going to say his name this time around, as it's the start of the article from our news partners at KFOX 14, who have been in the courtroom and having their crews outside of it throughout. As also Eric von Holstein-Rathlow chiming in saying, good afternoon. Hope everyone had a fantastic Independence Day. Seems like some of you all had some interesting times out there. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But also John Adams and others chiming in over there. So there was a brief recess until about 1 o'clock. And of course, the now not just accused, but I believe convicted is the right phrase in this case, even if we are still waiting on the sentencing part of it, because he has both been admitted and found guilty. 90 consecutive federal sentences on this. And some of the initial reporting about gas and immediate emotional responses from those in the courtroom when the shooter did end up entering into the courtroom with a, just setting the scene here in the article from our news partners at KFOX 14, written by Erica Esquivel, saying that specifically was pretty well surrounded by federal marshals. 2 marshals behind Crucius and other marshals were spread out across the courtroom. Of course, federal marshals being one of the agencies involved with maintenance and safety of inmates and those accused. So definitely a part of it. Our news partners at KFOX 14 earlier today did speak with former El Paso Mayor Dee Margo, who was also on our airwaves back closer to and in the immediate aftermath of the August 3rd Walmart shooting. He says that he saw Crucius, did not see Crucius show any emotion, and did not look at victims or their families. A little bit more description from the courtroom that the shooter was seen wiping the sweat off his hands on his jumpsuit, and that only addressed the judge about 3 or 4 times, saying yes, sir, or no, sir, when talking about having reviewed any of the documents or those kind of things. So there's a couple other aspects of it. I mean, there may have been an address. I know there was some other reporting going on in and around town through other outlets about him potentially making a allocution statement, though that has not been clear. I think that the update that I saw right before we got on air is that would not be coming today, if at all, during this. But this is going to be going on for the next couple of days, through the end of this week, essentially. It had originally been scheduled, you all may recall, this whole process for the end of last month, but then got pushed to the start of this month, of course, and will be going on through Friday. And then one more detail that has come out is that a restitution hearing will take place even after this process on September 25th. 9 a.m. in the federal courthouse, where victims will find out if any compensation they will be receiving, though the scope of that has not been clear. And Attorney Joe Spencer says that he will not give any comment until the end of these hearings. Another note that is at least new today, to me anyway, is that the state case, of course, has not been assigned here yet in El Paso, but there had been a question about, will a death penalty be sought? Of course, that also involves a whole lot of the issues involving the El Paso district attorney, or more accurately saying the district attorney for El Paso, but Bill Hicks, then again appointed district attorney earlier, of course, within months at this point, saying that he will be pursuing at this point the death penalty, though that has not yet been assigned a date for that case within the state house. So we do have some response. We have a little bit of audio we'll be playing for you here in the next segment when it comes to some response from the victims so far, or at the very least, specifically family of the Anchandos, and that story on its own, right? So we'll be talking more about that, and of course, a lot of national reporting that y'all may have been hearing going on with this, coming right out from our region, because another way that this has been put, I do believe, coming from El Paso Matters, specifically saying that this prosecution in its own right is pretty significant. So you can find the exact site about, frankly, the impact of this case, not even just locally, but federally here in just a bit. We're going to go ahead and take that first break of this hour right now. As I said, I'm going to be talking a bit more about this, and particularly already some of the response coming out. So stay tuned for more on Talk El Paso after this first break. Got to take that first one right now, but don't worry, we got a lot more coming up throughout the rest of these couple hours of the program. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this here on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Phone lines a little bit later, as we usually do. Make no worries about that. And just a lot more discussion about the things definitely going on right here in the borderland here today, but also, of course, affecting us here throughout the progression of the show. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
No wrecks on your El Paso freeways right now. El Paso police are off on the right shoulder on Gateway South at Cassidy. An accident reported at Edgemere westbound at Tierra Este. Police are wrapping up an earlier accident towards downtown Kansas at Texas Avenue. And Montana west at Airway, the right turn lane is closed for road work for another half hour. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Inflation compensation is back.
Oh, yes.
Demand your supply of $1,000.
$1,000? Oh.
Just listen for the keywords to text in to win $1,000. Happening now.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 every hour, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. with the inflation compensation on News Radio 690 AM. Brought to you by Charlie Clark Nissan and Charlie Clark Infiniti of El Paso. Orale!
This report is sponsored by Blindster.com.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. And right now, save 50% off any order during our July 4th sale. Blindster.com.
If you're suffering and there's a safe, natural, easy-to-use solution to help make you feel better, wouldn't you at least want to try it? That's why millions of people use Navage Nasal Care to help relieve their symptoms of sinus congestion, allergies, snoring, and other nasal-related problems. I'm Martin Hoke, and I invented Navage to make cleaning your nose easy. Navage uses powered suction to pull saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, helping flush out everything that makes you miserable. Nearly 4 million people use Navage to breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier. People like Candace, a verified Navage user who writes, "This is the greatest invention ever made. I truly can't believe the difference and the relief it has made in my sinus problems. Thank you," unquote. Navage is the safe, drug-free solution you've been looking for. Available at Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Target, and Navage.com. Navage, Navage, clean nose, healthy life.
Getting a news feed on your phone while driving
makes driving more difficult.
This is dangerous. Getting a news feed without a computer or mobile device?
It would be impossible.
Unless, of course, you get your live news feeds at the top and bottom of the hour.
It's easy.
Traffic and weather all day.
It's as simple as that.
Trending stories tend to change.
Every minute of every day.
Twice an hour, we'll feed your curiosity.
Stay informed.
Shouldn't we listen?
They're hungry.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
In today's Marketers Report, Kate Cronin, Chief Brand Officer of Moderna, weighs in on the speed of audio production.
In this day and age, and particularly at Moderna, where we have new information coming out on a regular basis, being able to feed that information to the audio format makes being nimble and pivoting easy, and that's what I really like about it.
As the #1 audio company, iHeartMedia gives marketers access to the audiences, influencers, insights, and data you need to grow. If you're a marketer, go to iHeartResults.com.
With an open channel,
I guess just try to keep channels open.
We welcome open-minded individuals.
I try to keep an open mind to all issues.
With open arms.
I think we need to always have our eyes open.
For open conversation. And when you open the iHeartRadio app, you open a whole new world. Wherever you are.
What should America do about immigration crisis?
I guess open the borders, but at the same time, check everyone that's coming in.
Open the gates.
A free download in the App Store or at ktsmradio.com.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Most of the time, traffic is pretty good. But there are times when traffic can be pretty bad. No, I mean like really bad. Almost, but more like an asteroid's gonna hit the city and everyone's trying to get out of town at once and nobody's car is moving and people are running down the highway clutching their kids and whatever belongings they can grab. Yep, now you got it. It's times like these you need your severe traffic station. Traffic and weather all day. Stay informed with El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Including, of course, those dropping those likes and reacts over on the social media. James Holmes, Flaco Jimenez, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Ida Beza Gardner, and Angel Rueda. Do appreciate that. Along with other comments coming in, including on some more national things, including things may or may not have been found at the White House over the holiday weekend or extended time here, which is Yeah, I'm sure our national hosts are definitely addressing that one here, but we got plenty of local stuff to talk about in the meantime. Don't worry, including, of course, the fact that there was a number of incidents and even fires caused over the weekend, or I guess over the holiday extended weekend, depending on how y'all's days off ended up working, including one happening early this morning from our news partners at KFOX 14. Fireworks ignite fire at Westside Picnic Area on Trans Mountain. No injuries reported, but some pictures were posted by the El Paso Fire Department showing that basically on the downslope from, okay, you know, they got those picnic areas, I guess would be the right way to put them, kind of overlooking the west side of El Paso from Trans Mountain Drive. Apparently someone acting the fool up that way with no injuries reported, thankfully, but having to show kind of on the downslope them getting fire hoses out that way. And yeah, that was not a good situation. And other ones, including a brush fire, potentially from kids popping fireworks near 2400 block of Campbell Street on a Tuesday afternoon, showing some charring basically right below a bunch of houses, which I'm sure wasn't totally fun with them. Also, a different one on the 9800 block of Eloise Road, Eloice, and fireworks, the cause of both theirs, and at least a couple of incidents involving injuries. One person hospitalized following firework incident in Sunland Park, and at least one other incident of severe burns in Sunland Park man there as well. So I hope y'all were safe out there, however you were choosing to celebrate. And one kind of disturbing incident as well, that it looks like there may have been some vandalism at the Old Glory Memorial. That was discovered with damage over the weekend after a car backed into it. Caretakers at the memorial, according to our news partners at KFOX 14, that's the one with the giant flag off of 54 as you head towards Trans Mountain that way. If you're wondering what we're talking about there, that a red Volkswagen backed into the monument in front of the Female Veterans Memorial, basically shattering one of the, I'm not going to call it tombstone shaped, but that's a pretty good approximation of it. And that names of people and companies who donated $100 or more to help build the monument. It will take from $15,000 to $20,000 to get that monument replaced. So not a great situation there. But again, hope you all stay safe and enjoyed the 4th of July holiday. But of course, progressing here in El Paso, more on that, well, the case that has now wrapped up. Believe what the information coming out from both our news partners at KFOX 14 and multiple other reporting outlets right now is that, yes, the federal trial, or the federal sentencing part of the trial for the, again, admitted Walmart shooter has wrapped up for the day, but we are looking at another few days of it. Some of the updates that have come out of there so far have been on the actual sentencing guidelines, specifically most of the trial earlier today, specifically reporting to El Paso Matters reporting from a little bit earlier today, saying that Jessica Avila of the Federal Probation and Pretrial Services Department, suggesting the amount of it. Of course, the admitted shooter pled guilty to 23 counts of hate crime resulting in death, 23 counts of use of a firearm to commit murder and a crime of violence, 22 counts of hate crime resulting attempt to kill, and 22 counts of using a firearm during a crime of violence. And so there were some sentencing guidelines that were given to that, but of course, as part of the plea agreement, it's going to result in 90 consecutive life sentences. So that's a very important phrase there, consecutive, because I mean, having covered a few trials here make it a little bit confusing, but consecutive means that it's going to be back to back, as opposed to concurrent, which means all at once. And as again noted by El Paso Matters here, the federal system does not allow for the possibility of parole. So at the very least, from federal charges, the again admitted shooter is never going to be breathing a breath of free air again while in the federal system. Though again, as noted beforehand, there is still the question of what will happen in the state trial. One of the major questions there, of course, being whether that will be able to progress before this current term of office, before we get through 2024 is essentially the deadline looking at here. And we're already more than halfway through 2023 at this point. And I don't think anyone, even without intervening circumstances such as a global health emergency and restrictions, shutdowns, etc., that came along with that, yeah, I wouldn't expect that anyone would think this is going to progress quickly by any means, even if it had been that there had been, let's say it's continuity of leadership within the El Paso district attorney for El Paso's office. Not anything against the current one, but there's been a lot of upheaval there. So we'll see what happens in that case, because again, there is the possibility of life sentences. Do have a, and RJ asking, is anyone surprised he doesn't have a shot at parole? No. Short answer, no. But there are some interesting statements that have come from outside of the courtroom. Again, if you're wondering why there's not a whole lot of video from inside of any of those responses, federal rules when it comes to media, camera presences, etc. within courtrooms are incredibly much more stringent than it is within state or any of the county courts that you've probably seen reporting like from right outside of the courtroom. I've done a number of those over the years. It was interesting. I usually would be fine going around with like a polo shirt. I mean, collared shirts, but like working professional with a emphasis on the like moving around because also carrying equipment. Going into the federal courthouse, the first time I ever went there, I recall, was asked to tuck the shirt in. I mean, it was a polo. And I did it, but just as an example, a case in point of the different rules and the different ways that they work there, it's much less permissive. So that's why only outside of the courtroom. So we do have a bit of audio. This is courtesy of our news partners at KFOX 14. Specifically, this is from Paul Jomrowski, father of Jordan Anchondo, who was, of course, noted as being killed at the Walmart along with her husband, Andre Anchondo, and their then 2-month-old baby, Paul, being injured on it. And now, as the grandparents, Jomrowski now raising them, he gave a couple of statements. There was both in English and Spanish. We've got the English portions here for you. So here's what Jomrowski initially had to say right outside of the courtroom.
Anchondo. And to be in the same room that killed her and my son-in-law, I don't know how to. There's no way you can put it into words. There's nothing you can say or do. It's sad because he lives no matter what justice is. I don't think there's a way you can put it into justice in essence, because he lives on it and you lose a life. And my kids my grandkids, I call my kids because we raise them, have to live with this now for the rest of their life. So there's not much you can say in perspective of what it is. We're here to support the other families that are here in behalf of representing my daughter and my son-in-law.
And apologies for the background noise in that clip as well. This is the federal courthouse that's right there in downtown El Paso. There's a bit of a park, for lack of a better term, some grass, plantings, trees, etc. right around it, but otherwise it's right there on the streets, not too far from the El Paso County Courthouse. So it's got a little bit of background noise and, of course, that locust sounding thing in the background there. But we have a little bit more from him. There was, again, questions in both English and Spanish. And so our, again, news partners at KFOX 14, as well as other media present on site, did ask him about a question that he had been asked by Spanish language media.
So he's asking me if it's justice on what's going on. I'm telling him these lives will never be brought back to life. So how is that justice? And who's to say what justice is? You know, what we do is we try to deal with it as every other family has, is continue to go on with your life, and that's pretty much it.
Could you introduce yourself and tell us about your family members?
Paul Jomrowski. I'm the father of Jordan Anchondo. We have custody of 2 of the 3 kids. The baby Paul, of course, he's doing really good. He's 4 years old now. And of course, Skylin is the oldest. She's going to be 9 next month, and she's doing really good as well.
And then finally, one longer clip, again, from Jomrowski here, who also introduced himself in the midst of that clip, who was, of course, raising parts of that family, the younger children that were left behind in the wake of this. And not clear if any major statements. I mean, there were a report by El Paso Matters here, specifically more than 30 victims and families of those killed in the courtroom Wednesday. They know then it's unclear how many will speak during victims' impact statements, and a little bit of clarity because there had been a question we brought up earlier about not a huge statement being made by the representation for the admitted shooter here, but Joe Spencer, who was, of course, one of the attorneys, told in the courtroom that the defendant will give his allocution, his address, to the judge before sentencing after the victim impact statements conclude. Paso Matters does note that defendants have a right to speak to the judge before sentencing, but are not required to do so. So, final statement here from, again, immediately outside the courtroom being made by, again, one of the families of the victims here, Jomrowski, on, well, frankly, more of his feelings on this, and at least for me, a rather surprising statement on what he feels about forgiveness for the shooter.
Like I said, I do give him forgiveness, so hopefully that he finds God in the future, but, he's asked me, what would I tell him? I said, I wouldn't tell him anything. There's nothing to tell a person like that. What's done is done.
Baby Paul is just turning 4. Is
He
he
just
starting to
turned
ask
4.
questions?
Excuse me?
Is he starting to ask questions, or you're trying to
No,
explain
he's
what
too
happened?
young. He's too young to understand. I mean, he knows who his parents are.
Yeah.
He knows the situation, but he doesn't really. He's too young. He's still baby.
Are you anxious about that conversation?
Not really. I mean, like I said, raising his sister, I mean, I think it's a help because she knows and she's been through that. So to have her be by our side and to deal with that in the future is going to be, I think to us a little bit more of a blessing.
And how are you finding the strength to sit through this and to face that man?
I look at it with, representing my family and my daughter. Pretty much, that's pretty much it. So of course, prayer before you come in here to give you the strength and the wisdom and endurance to just sit through it and be in the same courtroom with the person that killed your family member is hard. It's very, very hard. I mean, you sit there and you think, man, if you didn't do what you did, I'd have my child, in hug right now.
Sorry for your loss.
But, I think I'm gonna call it right there, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Nanchando.
Again, speaking there, that being Paul Jemrowski, again, with his speaking about and the experiences of his family who were part of the victims of the August 3rd shooting. So again, the sentencing phase of this trial does continue. There are more technical matters that have to go through this, but again, the full expectation, and I don't have any reason to believe that this won't be the outcome of there being 90 consecutive sentences, but it's very likely to be an emotional another couple of days here with it having wrapped up for today, but this is expected to go on through Friday, as we will get into then victims' impact statements, in which those who were either directly or their family members victims of this whole shooting will get the chance to speak directly to the, again, admitted shooter in this case, and the potential to hear a statement from that person himself at the end of this. So that's a little bit of what's going on with that today. Apparently it was a sweltering one down in the El Paso federal courthouse in downtown today, as there was some limited capacity of air conditioning. So it's going to be a both hot and emotional time going on for the next couple of days in downtown El Paso. So I will fully expect there to be more reports coming on, both that we will bring you and, of course, coming out from national media on this. Heard a number of those already today. So we're going to take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, we're going to talk a little bit more about some other things changing in the city of El Paso, including the farewell interview, so to speak, with now former El Paso City Manager Tommy Gonzalez, and of course a whole lot more going on here in the borderland. So stay tuned for more on Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Phone lines here in just a bit, as we normally do, but in any case, stay tuned. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
I'm Fidel Moreno Mesa with your CBS 4 News Update. Happening today, Patrick Crusius, the gunman in the 2019 Walmart mass shooting, is expected in federal court for his sentencing hearing. This comes after Crusius pled guilty to killing 23 people and injuring 22 others in federal court back in February. Now, this morning, the sentencing hearing will begin at 9 o'clock. A retired federal prosecutor says at the start of the hearing, the court will discuss the pre-sentence report and hear and resolve any objections to the report. The judge will then directly address Crusius and his counsel and give them the opportunity to make a formal statement to the court. Now, before the sentencing begins, both Crusius and his attorneys can request a particular sentence. Court documents state that Crusius is facing 90 consecutive life sentences. For more news headlines, head to our website at cbs4local.com. I'm Fidel Moreno Mesa with your CBS 4 News Update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
No delays on your Valley Freeways, I-10 east and westbound, looking good as you make your way through downtown. An accident reported Airway at Boeing Drive near the airport. Westbound on Edgemere at Tierra Este, a crash reported. And a medical unit's responding to an injury accident reported Oregon at East Paisano Drive. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From the CBS 4 Warn Weather Center, this is meteorologist Evan O'Regan. Very good Wednesday morning to you all. We have a heat advisory that's going to go into effect for the borderland starting at noon today. For those excessively hot temperatures that we're going to be seeing, our high today is around 105 in El Paso under partly cloudy skies, and those temperatures are only going to go up from here. We could potentially get up towards that 110 degree mark as we go into the weekend and early next week as we get a new high pressure ridge coming into the area. From the CBS 4 Warn Weather Center, this is meteorologist Evan O'Regan.
This report is sponsored by Wendy's Late Night, open until midnight or later. Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Just go to 4hims.com/radio. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and trusted generic alternatives to the name brands at up to 95% off. That's right. Get generic for Viagra, the same active ingredient as brand name Viagra, but for 95% less. It's the same medication, still prescribed by a licensed medical provider, but with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, 4hims.com/radio. That's 4hims.com/radio for your free online visit. FORHIMS.com/RADIO.
If you're like many people, you may think custom blinds is a job for expensive professionals. Well, at Blindster, if you have a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install our custom blinds and save big. Plus, we guarantee they'll fit. And right now, save 50% off any order during our July 4th sale. Blindster.com.
This report is sponsored by Blindster.com.
Veterans, are you planning to file a VA disability claim? Get ready for a better way to file. The Decision Ready Claim Program gets you a decision within 30 days after it's submitted. That's just 30 days for the benefits and services you've earned. Talk to your accredited representative or go to www.benefits.va.gov/DRC to learn more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
iHeartRadio brings you New to View, Streaming Edition.
Looking for something to watch? Listen up. Next week on Netflix, Monday, it's Season 2 of the kids' cartoon Storybots Answer Time. Next Wednesday, it's the debut of the Netflix family movie Mr. Carr and the Knights Templar and the Netflix docuseries Quarterback featuring Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota. Next Thursday on Netflix, we have the debut of the kids' cartoon Sonic Prime Season 2, as well as the new Netflix comedy series Survival of the Thickest. Next Friday, it's the premiere of the Netflix reality competition show 5-Star Chef, the Netflix film Bird Box Barcelona, a new story expanding on the original Netflix hit, as well as the premiere of Season 5 of the reality show Too Hot to Handle with host Mario Lopez. Next Tuesday on Hulu, it's the debut of the docuseries Betrayal: The Perfect Husband. Next Wednesday on Apple TV+, it's the second season premiere of the comedy The After Party, as well as the first season finale of Platonic. Next Friday on Apple TV+, it's the much-anticipated second season of the sci-fi drama The Foundation. Next Thursday on Max, it's the premiere of the new drama series Full Circle, starring Claire Danes, Zazie Beetz, Timothy Olyphant, Dennis Quaid, and more. Also next Thursday on Max, it's the original thriller film Gray Matter and the Max reality show Project Greenlight, A New Generation, the story behind that movie Gray Matter by the competition winner, Miko Winbush. Next Thursday on FX on Hulu, it's the 5th season premiere of the comedy What We Do in the Shadows. And next Friday on Amazon Prime Video, the debut of Season 2 of the teen drama The Summer I Turned Pretty.
And that's New to View on iHeartRadio. Happy binging.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 news update. The first day of the federal sentencing hearing for the El Paso Walmart shooter, Patrick Crusius, got underway in downtown El Paso today. There were gasps and immediate crying when Crusius entered the courtroom. Crusius was wearing a blue jumpsuit and orange shoes. He was sitting next to his attorney, Joe Spencer. Crusius was handcuffed and shackled. This afternoon's session started with the victim's impact statements. The gunman is facing 90 federal consecutive consecutive sentences, he is still facing the possibility of the death sentence in the state trial, which isn't expected to start until next year. The Sunland Park Fire Department says a man in his 20s had burn injuries to his face and hands after setting off a firework. A neighbor says the man had picked up a firework when it went off in his hand. Also, El Paso fire crews responded to several brush fires that were caused by fireworks. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages. We're up on these days, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk. A lot of conversation going on over there, including on some of the national situations, which, yeah, Friday is always coming. But also, Amber Bond actually chiming in saying was in the courthouse, it was sweltering. I mean, there was notable issues of people wiping sweat off their brows, including from the admitted shooter in this case. And RJ saying shooter getting used to heat for eternity is one thing, but not for everyone else. Fix the AC. So part of that, again, reporting on here from El Paso Matters, specifically saying that there was an outage over the weekend that was making it a little bit hot. Only about 50% capacity is what they were saying is the issue with the AC in that building. Yeah, that federal judge Guadarrama apologized at the outset of the hearing because of the high temperature in the courtroom. He said the chillers at the federal courthouse broke down over the weekend and have been restored to 50% capacity. Anyone who's had a major building here in the borderland, I'm sure, can commiserate for a bit. We used to have that in our building before we got the mini split style things installed, which, knock on wood, continue working. And hopefully I didn't just jinx it, because we couldn't do this if it wasn't for that. We got not even just a discomfort issue, but equipment that we got to use that if it gets too hot, stops working, because that's how electronics work sometimes. Anyway, so again, this will be continuing tomorrow as well. The El Paso federal courthouse in downtown, the new one, I do believe, because there's also the old one right across the way there. But yeah, downtown El Paso continuing to be the focus on that, and I'm sure a lot of some of the pictures I've been seeing coming out from downtown, quite a lot of media presence. So I would not be at all surprised if this were to continue on and continue being a focus of all of this. And yeah, specifically that being the U.S. Federal courthouse technically near that split, but off Campbell Street, I guess is the best way to put it here. A couple of things that are going on in the borderland. One that we didn't really quite mark last week, but there's a very good roundup. And beyond that, from El Paso Inc. this week, I'll just subtitle the exit interview. City Manager Tommy Gonzalez says goodbye. And noting that this last Thursday marked the end of Tommy Gonzalez's tenure as El Paso's second city manager. That both goes into the issues, the accomplishments, the controversies surrounding that. I will say that, just the way that El Paso Inc. puts it is that in a wide-ranging conversation, Gonzalez reflected on his time in the Sun City and discussed his firing, accomplishments, and regrets, but he declined to comment on his severance pay, which was about $890,000. He also declined to comment on the ongoing inquiry into the use of taxpayer-funded purchasing cards by some city representatives and the city manager's office. So it's a Q&A style that goes over what it was like for the past 9 years. The focus is what the biggest challenge is for both city council and for the next city manager, of which he says on that one, the budget is going to be a big priority for this council. The execution of key capital projects is important, as well as the ongoing maintenance of streets and the continued development of the staff. And also noting that he didn't really work that closely with this council, given that Pete was given the axe in February under one of the first actions, if not the first action, one of the first actions being done by this new council after the elections. So one of the questions that's also interesting from El Paso Inc. on this one, and one that they have, that they've explored over the years, is the city business friendly? And well, Tommy Gonzalez had to say there is, quote, "Yes, I do. I would say that it's pro-business, especially during COVID. We made a huge push to really support the small businesses. We work with both chambers of commerce with the COVID dollars to really help the small businesses to get through a very tough time." and also talks about influence, including of prominent El Paso's and business leaders like Paul Foster and Woody Hunt was the question there, and also about rising in taxes, which Eric von Holstein-Rathlow was referencing in a different way, saying with all the taxes we pay, they think they could keep the AC in the courthouse functional. I will note that it is the federal as opposed to just the local, but it's taxes nonetheless. I'll agree with you, but as much as I certainly commiserate and feel very sorry for the people in that courtroom, I know of several and have connections to several who were having to be there, both in terms of course, previous guests in this show, as well as people who were in the working on there. Amanda Moncada asking who or what is El Paso Inc. We have them on, of course, their editor, Robbie Gray, on most of, we would have had him on already, but the first Tuesday of this month was July 4th, and we weren't here. So we'll have him on next week to talk more about that. But they're a weekly business journal here in El Paso. So them getting this interview, one of the major ones that goes on for, okay, I'm looking on online, so I can't give you a column, inches, or pages version of it. But a lot of interesting questions going on there, and a pretty exclusive interview that is definitely worth a look. So yeah, El Paso Inc. is El Paso's business journal, and you can find promos both for this program and for some of our sister programs, including the El Paso History Radio Show over there. They do note a couple of other things going on here, including what to know about the August 3rd case progressing through the El Paso Federal Courthouse, but also some more things we've talked to them about in the past, of course, about business investment and continued development in this area. And one of the ones they're reporting on, a Taiwanese company plans $72 million investment in Santa Teresa. So, okay, not El Paso proper, but the borderland region, because you don't think that Santa Teresa has an impact both on either side of this. I don't know what to tell you. And then also about some other local development, including the 911 and integration with a mental health crisis line locally, and how an El Paso-born entrepreneur wins international award for yacht charter software. I know that there have been people known who have seen show, I forget what the reality show, I've seen an episode or two of it, the reality show that focuses on people on boats and the staff working on them, has seen, among other things, a rise in popularity. And he's now doing a app towards that. So innovation that way. You wouldn't think that a desert boy like that would be getting into yacht software, but hey, things can often be different and interesting. I will say that. In any case, let's go ahead and take that next break right now. And coming out of this break, we got more comments that we'll absolutely get to here, but we'll also go ahead and open up those phone lines. So there's a lot to say. I often say that we take on all comments, but let's just say, with this being a incredibly serious issue and the progression of this trial, if you're here to talk about the importance and the impact on this community, you're more than welcome to do so. If you're here to just, let's just say, we're going to be very careful with these comments here because this is an incredibly important issue for this community. But let's go ahead and take that break right now. Again, that number to call if you want to get on the line, add your 2 cents, is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
No delays on your Valley Freeways, I-10 east and westbound, looking good as you make your way through downtown. An accident reported Airway at Boeing Drive near the airport. Westbound on Edgemere at Tierra Este, a crash reported, and a medical unit's responding to an injury accident reported Oregon at East Paisano Drive. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Wendy's Late Night, open until midnight or later. Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Every day, you breathe in thousands of tiny little germs, allergens, and viruses. Don't let these invisible invaders make breathing through your nose impossible. Flush them out with Navage. I'm Martin Hoke, and I invented Navage to make cleaning your nose easy. Navage uses powered suction to pull saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, helping flush out everything that makes you miserable. Nearly 4 million people use Navage to breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier. People like Doug, a verified Navage user who writes, I had difficulty for years breathing through my nose. After using Navage, my whole breathing has changed. My sinuses don't hurt and no more stuffy nose. It's an amazing product. Unquote. If you suffer from sinus congestion, allergies, or snoring, then Navage is the safe, drug-free solution you've been looking for. Navage is at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Target, and Navage.com. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E, clean nose, healthy life.
One-on-one with Susan Eisen.
Setting my very first diamond 30 years ago in my garage late at night took me 5 hours to do. Since then, our priority is the quality of our work.
When it comes to the highest quality control standards, visit SusanEisen.com. One-on-one with Susan Eisen.
Every diamond in our store is personally selected and graded by me to ensure you're getting more value than what you are paying for. That sets us apart.
When it comes to expert advice on diamonds, visit SusanEisen.com.
Hi, I'm Burt Ward, Robin from TV's Batman, inviting you to feed your dog natural, non-GMO, Gentle Giants dog and puppy food. Dogs eating Gentle Giants and following our special feeding and care program are living as long as 27 healthy, active years with a wonderful quality of life. Holy wow, 27 years! Think of all the extra years you could enjoy with your dog at Target, H-E-B, and stores near you. Try Gentle Giants cat and kitten food too.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com, and I sell custom blinds designed for do-it-yourselfers. Unlike stock blinds offered at big box retailers, Blindster blinds are custom made for your windows, and shipping is free. And right now, save 50% off any order during our July 4th sale. Blindster.com.
KTSM AM El Paso is News Radio 690, an iHeart radio station.
In 50 feet, turn left. Why are you driving so slowly?
After a few drinks, I'm taking it slow.
Well, you're not fooling the cop behind you.
What?
Get ready to pay in 0.1 miles.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch.tv, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, and a lot of commentary coming in there, particularly about the shooting itself. Of course, the one that is progressing through the federal courthouse over these next few days, the sentencing phase of the August 3rd, 2019 Walmart shooting with the admitted and pled guilty shooter progressing through the sentencing phase of this, fully expected to be 90 consecutive life sentences, with, again, the major part of this, and I guess arguably the major reason, besides seeing the progression, the carrying out of the justice here, being that of the victim's impact statements, which, again, will bring you what we can, what is available, what is being said mostly outside of the courtroom, though I'm sure there will be transcripts and other things being reported on both by our news partners at KFOX 14 as well as other within the community. It's going to be a slower process than usual, because basically any notes they're taking are going to have to be done by hand. There are a few courtrooms in El Paso outside of the federal courthouse that do require that prohibit devices of any kind or any kind of recording, but that's the by rote within the federal courthouse. So we'll be getting highlights at best for the most part. So we'll bring you what we can as we end up progressing through this, and some commentary on what individuals can or should have done. I'm aware of some individuals who weren't necessarily in the area, but had some commentary closer to the incident itself about concealed carrying and those kind of things. And, well, that's been also just a conversation within the community, even outside of, I would have to say, the exact, well, the national or even the statewide conversation, what's been going on with that. It's been just a different tenor. But let's get to at least one phone call before we end up taking that next break right now. We do have Marco in Central on the line with us here right now. Marco, thanks for joining us.
How's it going, Andrew?
Doing all right there. What's on your mind?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not calling about the incident that happened in El Paso. I want to focus on immigration, but first off, again, I want to give out my condolence for all the families that have suffered, and hopefully they'll receive justice at the end of this trial. But my focus today is on immigration.
Okay.
And so I want to focus on immigration in a different way, because I want people to realize what's happening in Europe right now, in France, that is a potential. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that's a potential future for America. So what's causing the riots in France right now? Muslims that are disenfranchised. Okay, so it's not just there in France, by the way. It's all over Europe. So this happened about 10, 15 years ago when they started getting people from the Middle East because of the Spring of Liberty or whatever it was called. Do you remember what they were?
The Arab Spring. Mm-hmm.
The Arab Spring. Thank you. And so at that point, you had a lot of Muslims that were fleeing into Europe. And right now, you think we're having problems here. They're literally getting flotillas and ships of migrants that are coming into Europe right now, into Britain. There's images of like pontoons with hundreds of people on them. Literally, it's like it's an invasion, like something out of D-Day, smashing into like the British Isles and stuff. And so these are Muslim disenfranchised. What's the word that I want? I don't want to say refugees, but these people are looking for a different life. Now, what happens is many of these Muslims, as they go and acclimate into many of these countries, not all of the countries have the same rule set as France. Some of the places, like in, I'm trying to think of one of the European countries where they're very strict on the working conditions for Muslims. So you can't just go there and get money off of the government. You have to actually go there and work. I want to say it's Poland, but I don't want to be misquoted here because I don't like giving out false information. That's something I don't want to do. But not all of the European countries are like that. France, on the other hand, is exactly like that. You come in, they want to give you everything. Why is that important to America? I want everybody, including yourself, Andrew, okay, go to Google and type in UN replacement migration or United Nations replacement migration. The first thing it takes you to is a PDF file. And the PDF file is a UN document that's and it literally says it right there, replacement migration for an aging population. Okay, that is the framework that they used during the Arab Spring to siphon millions of Muslims into Europe. That is the same program that they're using in America. So anybody that sits there and says, "Oh, the Great Replacement theory or whatever migration thing," it's a lie. No, it's right there. You can go to the UN's own document center, and then they will literally, if you go to UN replacement migration in Google, you will get a PDF file. You can download it.
So I see what you're talking about right there, and we're right up against the top of the hour here, so I'm going to summarize a couple things briefly here. I see that one, and yeah, we've talked about that on this program beforehand, that the idea, if there is population decline happening in an area, that's in order to continue to foster economic development, not see population crisis issues that are coming up, it's often put that immigration is the solution for that if indigenous populations are no longer at replacement levels. European countries, the U.S. To an extent, and other more developed nations, I mean, under that document you're talking about, the listing mentions France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, the UK, US, Europe, and European Union overall. So there is a conversation going on here. I'm going to draw a stark distinction between that, though, and Great Replacement theory, and saying that there is trying to be a removal. I mean, it's basically an argument of genocide by proxy along those lines, that there are certain populations that are being de-emphasized and not allowed to move forward here. And there's a lot of different, it's kind of a fill in the blank of your own theory on that here, but we're right up against the top of this hour. I'll talk a little bit more about that coming out of this, so we got to take that break right now. So stay tuned, more Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. More phone calls after this break, so stay tuned. Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690
News
KTSM.
on the hour and a half. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. Travelers continue to see issues at airports as people start to head home after the 4th of July holiday. This comes as thousands of travelers like this woman have seen their flights delayed or canceled over the past few days.
Flights were delayed, flights were canceled. I mean, we sat on a plane for an hour waiting for something to happen. Eventually they just said, nope, it's canceled.
FlightAware reports there have been more than 4,300 flights delayed within, into, or out of the U.S. today. The central U.S. is under the threat of severe weather. Forecasters say severe storms are likely from Chicago south to St. Louis and Little Rock and west toward Wichita, Amarillo, and Denver. Residents are being told to watch out for damaging winds and large hail, as well as possible isolated tornadoes, especially in the plains. Former President Trump's campaign says it raised $35 million in 2023's second quarter. The increase in fundraising came as Trump faced criminal indictments. Trump's fundraising committee is split into two parts, his official campaign and his political action committee that focuses on expenses like his legal bills. The campaign's fundraising efforts have leaned heavily into Trump's indictments, like requesting supporters to make a contribution to peacefully defend our movement from the never-ending witch hunt. Wall Street is closing with stocks lower. Natalie Migliori reports.
This comes after the release of minutes from the Federal Reserve's meeting earlier this month. Investigators believe the central bank will move forward with further rate hikes later this year. At the closing bell, the Dow Jones lost 129 points, the S&P 500 dropped by 8 points, and the NASDAQ fell by 25 points. I'm Natalie Migliori.
The 4th of July was the hottest day ever recorded on Earth. The record comes just a day after a new record had been set. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. Former President Trump's co-defendant in the classified documents case should finally be arraigned tomorrow. Karen Curtis has more.
Trump was arraigned in Miami last month, but his aide Walt Nauta's arraignment was delayed so he could secure a lawyer admitted to the Florida Federal District where he and the former president were charged. Nauta's delay could further delay special counsel Jack Smith's December start date for Trump's trial.
Half a dozen companies are being reprimanded by the FTC and FDA for selling products containing THC in packages resembling regular snacks. The agencies said the packaging for the products containing this psychoactive substance are nearly identical to those of Doritos, Cheetos, and Nerds candy. The FTC said marketing edible THC products that can be easily mistaken by children for regular foods is reckless and illegal. Paramus police are looking for pranksters who played a forgotten baby stunt Monday on mall shoppers. Sarah Lee Kessler reports.
This prank was no joke. What looked like a baby left in an infant carrier on the roof of a car as the driver took off. Panicked shoppers at all three Paramus malls, Garden State Plaza, Paramus Park, and Bergen Town Center, flooded 911 with calls about a Tesla driving around with a baby stranded on the roof, not knowing it was a doll.
It should not be happening. I mean, that's sick. I would freak out if I saw that.
That's not good at all. You could give someone like panic attack.
I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
Those looking for love may find inspiration in a Tampa Bay couple. Dr. Thomas McMeekin and Nancy Gamble met in high school in California, dated in college, broke up, and went their separate ways. Over 60 years later, McMeekin reconnected with Gamble, who lives in California. Last week, she flew to Tampa International Airport to see him, and he got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. She said yes, and now they're planning a new life together in California. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
Now your chance to win $1,000. Just enter this nationwide keyword on our website. Bonus. That's bonus. Enter it now.
Get your tickets now
at AXS.com
for our 2023 iHeartRadio Music Festival.
T-Mobile Arena here in Las Vegas.
September 22nd and 23rd.
Streaming live only on Hulu.
The iHeartRadio Music Festival.
Brought to you by T-Mobile. Experience more of the music you love with the record-setting 5G network. T-Mobile customers can unlock VIP benefits at the festival all weekend long. It's better over here. See why at T-Mobile.com/SEEWHY.
This report is sponsored by Blindster.com.
If you're like many people, you may think custom blinds is a job for expensive professionals. Well, at Blindster, if you have a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install our custom blinds and save big. Plus, we guarantee they'll fit. And right now, save 50% off any order during our July 4th sale. Blindster.com.
Season 2 of the Alphabet Boys podcast takes you inside the secret investigations that federal agents never thought would see the light of day and asks this disturbing question: are America's top cops catching criminals or creating them?
So you do personal security all over the world. You're connected to all these different people, and you had somebody call you and say, can you get grenades and guns for this guy in Colombia?
Listen to Alphabet Boys Season 2 on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Only iHeartRadio gives you access to all of your favorite radio stations.
Rover's Morning Glory.
It's The Woody Show.
It's Elliot in the morning.
All of the once-in-a-lifetime events.
iHeartRadio Music Festival.
Woo! All of the best free curated playlists.
It's everything that rocks.
All of the great podcasts for every interest.
This is Freddie Prinze Jr. from the Wrestling with Freddie podcast.
All of the mind-blowing contests.
$20,000.
Awesome. All of your favorite superstars.
This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters.
Best of all, it doesn't cost a thing. Download the absolutely free iHeartRadio app now.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
No crashes on your El Paso freeways right now, just a disabled truck that's blocking the right shoulder on I-10 westbound near Joe Battle in the Lower Valley. The turnaround lanes are still closed due to road work eastbound on Americas Avenue after Alameda to North Loop Drive, and westbound on Americas Avenue. Turnarounds are closed after Socorro to Pan American Drive. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Contact Tax Relief Helpers for details and restrictions. Attention anyone that owes money to the IRS. The IRS has restarted aggressive enforcement actions against taxpayers who owe back taxes that were temporarily suspended for COVID. If you owe $10,000 or more, you must hear this because now is the time to clear your IRS tax debt. A special toll-free number has been established so you can stop penalty fees, avoid liens, levies, and other hostile measures by the IRS. Call Tax Relief Helpers right now at 800-981-9615. Tax Relief Helpers will provide you with the maximum protection afforded by law.
I got behind on my taxes and owed $48,000. I didn't know what to do. I called and they got my bill lowered to just $3,500.
I owed $87,000 in taxes and it was scary. I got the amount I owed down to just $3,500. I saved $83,500.
If you owe money to the IRS, don't wait another day. Call 800-981-9615 right now before the IRS enforces liens, levies, or other aggressive measures. The call and consult are absolutely free. Call now. Call 800-981-9615. 800-981-9615. 800-981-9615.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch.tv, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk. And of course, that phone line available, though the last available line just filled up, but keep that number handy, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Based on the previous callers here, we again got hit right at the top of the hour there with them. I'm going to talk a little bit further about it, but I will just add this note that our guest tomorrow on the program, interviewer, we're able to record with the editor of founder and CEO, and previous editor, and of course, has a lot of duties with it, with El Paso Matters, the local nonprofit, reporting concern on their story that they've done on the Darien Gap, specifically when he visited. Bob Moore, again, the head over there, heading down to that area on the more or less the border of Panama and Colombia, and the situations that are still progressing there, as much as numbers even down in our region when it comes to immigration. We're seeing still an overall downward trend, particularly as of this week, with the rolling 7-day average of CBP encounters in our region as low as 390, though the in custody 7-day rolling average, I mean, it's not by any means not present in our region. I don't think it'll ever not be present in our region. The question is, at what level is it at? About 1,700 in our area currently in custody, though, if you're wondering about the incongruency there, like why is the encounters so low, but the in custody much higher, is because now that it's not as much of a hot spot in our area anymore. From places where it is a hot spot, there's often brought here for processing, which had been the case before, like 2014 to 2016 is when that's, I mean, those were some of the times I was directly reporting on these things, what was going on here, and we were seeing that happen where processing from other areas was coming here. But now that has, it's a constantly fluid and shifting situation. But I did say I would address a little bit more on what the previous caller was talking about. I see the document that he was mentioning there. It is Population Division, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, United Nations Secretariat from UN.org, replacement migration, which again, replacement migration, is it a solution to declining and aging populations? From the macroeconomic standpoint, the idea of having declining populations for whatever reason is generally not seen as a good thing. At the very least, it can be seen as stymieing economic development. Sure, there's been a lot of other conversation in the zeitgeist about that whole concept, both locally, nationally, and globally even. But basically, if you got less people, there's going to be an estimation of less economic activity happening, or even a degrading of the capability for economic activity to happen. Not just less of it, but certain things may no longer be possible or feasible at scale. And so that's of concern. So the idea of there being, essentially immigration it's not even necessarily a new term, though it comes up, the idea of having from other populations, other portions of the world, for generations now. Actually, Germany has been doing, and I know we're dealing with international stuff here with just a minute. Don't worry, we're not skipping forward to Friday here just yet. But I will say this: Germany, there's a food dish that it's popped up in a couple places here in El Paso. A Doner kebab, Donerkebab, or just kebabs. It ends up being substantially similar, if you've never had it before, to let's call it like a shawarma or gyros or things like that. It's a lot of similar origin points. It ends up being same ingredients, different spices, different national origins, that kind of thing. And it's becoming considered a national dish of Germany on its own, like street food, but it's been in place because there was a dearth of skilled labor that was needed. And so they did primarily recruiting from like Turkish and otherwise Middle Eastern populations. So much to the point is that there has been not anywhere. There's no exact apples to apples comparison whenever we talk about immigration and other border security issues, but their basic standpoint they went about it was to really focus on professional visas, but without any kind of permanency to it. And that created a lot of tension, particularly from the populations that came to then Germany to work there and ended up saying, well, these are our lives. We want to bring our families, we want to continue living here. Whereas the German, at least initial concept of it was, no, you can just work here for a bit and then go, which was not really, in my mind, respecting of like how humans work. So ended up having a lot of tension and then issues, and they've had to deal with that over the years. And I will say one thing to the previous callers on the whole Arab Spring thing. It wasn't, having studied and was studying international relations at that point in time as it was progressing, that's a lot of it. And I do mean a lot of it, particularly the displacement. There's been plenty of it, and particularly, I haven't heard it so much arriving in Britain, as the previous caller was saying, but certainly across the Mediterranean. That has been a particular point that was one of those sub-points that was brought up around when that sub missing and then found to be collapsed, crushed under the pressure, etc., was about the focus on that versus any of the migrant situations going on. There have been a lot of just interesting situations, including some real dirty deals that no one really wanted to get their hands messy with back when, say, Gaddafi was in power. That was one of the major things that he was actually getting, if not direct, at least surreptitious supports from different aspects of European governments to say, yeah, don't let them cross, because if you keep them there and you do whatever you want with that, kind of turning a blind eye to any draconian programs that were existing that way, of which there are, of course, documented. He had a revolution on him for not just because no one really liked him, but because of very, very serious things going on there, which was an aspect of the Arab Spring. I will say that. Maybe not the most successful aspect of it, but really the immigration and the situations being seen, that has continued, if not exactly apace, pretty continuously throughout. But what I will say is that a lot of the displacement came out of the Syrian and continues from the Syrian civil war. That was the major, particularly over land issues that a lot of European governments were dealing with. And they really had to confront both their governance and how they even considered it. Because the whole Schengen zone, the way that it works, that if you enter into Europe, into the European Union, you're then allowed free movement throughout the European Union. So that was not just this is one country's issue, but then becomes a entire body politic, that whole block issue. And that's one of the problems that has been making it complicated for them. And as much as, France has a long history of protests. Let's not make that make any bones about that, though this situation has been playing out. There have been, at the last check, 45,000 police that were deployed across the country to try and deal with this. It's certainly at a scale, just to call it another protest, and they always do protests, would be not accurate nor at all even reasonable for that situation. How that comes out, as much as there has been some glee talking about other armed rebellions in certain places and other parts of the European continent, aka Ukraine, and the whole Wagner PMC. That's a different if people are a bit more gleeful, at least from this hemisphere, towards that situation. Let me put it this way. To one of the core contentions of the previous caller, that of enfranchisement, or being specifically having populations disenfranchised, that is one of the core issues that comes down and is an issue with immigration. Because if you are not dealing with it, if you are not having done anything with regards to populations that are coming in, you're not even doing the sole core country a disservice, but of course to those populations. It's all often talked about in this hemisphere and within our local area as living in the shadows and wanting to bring people out of the shadows. And as much as there are those that have a punitive mindset towards this that I disagree vehemently with, because if you have people living on the fringes with no rights, accessibility, or reasonable access to either of those, you're going to have people that are either more easily preyed upon, do not have accessibility for or towards the systems of either government or justice in our country. And eventually that's going to come to a head. At low levels, you might get away with it for a while. But once you start talking about larger and larger amounts of people, then it starts coming to a head. And if not dealt with in a concerted way, one way or the other, frankly, I go towards the idea of that no one should be living in this country in the shadows without with the situations that can occur from it. I mean, the exploitation that can occur towards the saying, well, if you don't do what I want you to, like we've seen in like those meatpacking plaques and other parts of it, well, you better do what I tell you to. I mean, sure, we're breaking federal labor laws, but also if you don't do what I want you to, we're going to call, immigration on you. Those kind of things. Those are the situations that it can engender. So again, not exactly apples to apples with Europe, but similar types of issues. Absolutely at play here. So again, that's kind of the whole argument of if you're not dealing with people as people, you're setting not even just them, but us, yourselves, the entire system you inhabit up for failure. Anyway, that's a very serious issue that I want to talk a little bit at length about. But let's go ahead and get at least to a phone call or two here before we get to that next segment. Of course, that number to call, 915-544-5876. We do have Eric on the east side here with us right now. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we could always depend on Marco to promote his white supremacist and alt-right extremism on your show. He's always doing this. And, decent and rational people for years have been telling conservatives that their lies, racist rhetoric, and white supremacist narratives about immigrants causes racism against Hispanics and terrorism. Conservative fear-mongering about immigrants continues still nonetheless. The racism against Hispanics increases. And of course, the trend of right-wing terrorism naturally continues. There's a cause and effect relationship here conservatives are being willfully ignorant of. Right-wing terrorism motivated by the steady stream of fear-mongering about immigrants is swept under the rug and written off by right-wing media as mental illness or just a murderer every time it happens. And besides the right-wing terrorist attack on our community and our Hispanic community, in particular by Patrick Crucius, we also have the Tree of Life Synagogue right-wing terrorist attack killing 11 and the Buffalo right-wing terrorist attack killing 10 that were motivated by the Great Replacement white supremacist conspiracy theory that is promoted by everyday conservatives like Marco, mainstream conservative information sources, and most of your followers. And you
Okay. As much as I obviously want to talk about this issue, if you're going to use this time to just bash like everyone else that you're saying, my followers, so to speak, which is laughable in its own right, if you're actually looking at what anyone else was commenting or saying, but more specifically, if you're saying that everyone who disagrees with you, we often come down to this point is, well, if you're just slandering them here, that's not what we're going to do here. If you want to talk about these issues, as I have more than shown a willingness to do so, because again, you keep people in the shadows, you're going to then reap the whirlwind that you have then sown from it, because anyone not able to access systems of justice is both ripe for exploitation, and eventually there's only so much that any given population of people is going to be willing to put up with. The idea that, oh, well, it'll be coming before too long has never borne out in reality. And so this is one of those points that I think that you'd be willing to agree with me on, except then you accuse me of lying because you think that anyone who doesn't immediately and wholeheartedly agree with you is therefore not even just wrong, but bad in some other incontrovertible way to your own mind. And let's just say that as a simple no. If you don't think that reasonable people can come with different viewpoints on issues, I mean, there are certain things that I'm not even willing to broach conversation on, as much as I am very much about broaching and having conversation on issues. Someone's right to exist is not one of them. There is no debate about that. There is no, well, should these people get to exist? That no, it's not a question. It is not something that is able to be questioned, because as much as there is, again, like genocide by proxy talk, which is wrapped up in the whole great replacement theory and the reasonableness or lack thereof with that whole theory, I will say this, that if you're going to say that everyone else in this station is going to, this show is not going to be your whipping boy for everyone else that you like on this, and we're not going to be doing this relationship where you're going to try to get out as much just slaps in on everyone else that you think is listening to a program like this in the time before I end up ending the call here. If you want to talk about the issues, you want to talk about the aspects of it here, and this is one of the reasons why got some flack for this last week, as a matter of fact, about the invasion and that rhetoric. And tell you what, I'll talk more about that after that next break right now, because that's, I think, is reaping the whirlwind that comes from this when we use phrases like that. Because what happens when you have an invasion? What's the response to it that comes here? But I'll talk more about that. Just know, if you, it doesn't do a service to our community, doesn't do a service to the issue that you pretend to care about anyway. But if all you're going to come here was the vitriol against those that you disagree with politically, as opposed to what can we do about these situations, I'm not demanding answers from you. But if you're not going to talk reasonably about this, we're not going to do it. But let's go ahead and take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, and I'm going to have a very little patience with that for this week, because we have some very serious things that were going on right in this community, and someone trying to ply this for purposes beyond what impacts our community is just not going to be something I'm going to broach this week. It's too fresh, it's too raw, and this is not the right time to talk about it. But it's not about this. It's not about the issue. It's about the ego involved with it. So let's go ahead and take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, we'll get to more calls on the line. So if you want to call in and actually talk about what affects us and what's going on in our community, we're getting a little bit far afield here today, but I'll indulge it for a moment longer. 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back with this break, after this break, with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
A crash reported on Gateway West at Trowbridge is slowing traffic. I-10 westbound at Americas Avenue, a disabled truck on the right shoulder. An accident reported northbound Rich Beam at Zaragoza, and heavy traffic on northbound Mesa Street for the downtown exits up to Desert Boulevard with less than a 5-minute delay. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Wendy's Late Night, open until midnight or later. Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Why do you change your car's air filter? Because when it's clogged, it doesn't work. The same is true of your nose, the body's air filter. It's great at trapping allergens, dust, and viruses, but unless you clean it regularly, they can stay trapped, making you miserable. I'm Martin Hogue, inventor of Navage, the world's only nose cleaner with powered suction. Navage pulls saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, helping to flush out allergens, mucus, and germs. Here's a testimonial from a verified purchaser and a big Navage fan. Quote, I've been suffering for 30 years with chronic sinus infections and allergies. I stumbled across Navage. The suction is amazing. It cleared my sinus cavities better than anything I've tried before. Unquote. Navage has over 120,000 reviews with a 4.6-star average, written by people who use Navage to breathe better, snore less, and feel healthier. Wash your body's air filter with Navage at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and Target. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E, clean nose, healthy life.
For nearly 100 years, folks have trusted Blue Star medicated ointment to relieve the pain and itching of almost any skin irritation.
It works on my son's dry, itching feet and their jock itch.
I had this rash on my neck. Nothing worked until Blue Star.
Blue Star worked great on my ringworm without steroids.
My wife and I have been using Blue Star for years. It's never let us down.
Look for the white box with the Blue Star in the first aid section. Feel Blue Star work fast, or your money back.
Your home is the place where you know your loved ones are secure. But the things that keep your home protected can't keep pests at bay. That's where Raid comes in. For 60 years, RAID's scientists have worked to protect people around the world. With trusted research, ingredients, testing standards, and product efficacy, RAID seeks to create a better future for all, especially the ones you love most. RAID, protection for all.
There won't be much substance on your news feed until you add us. Just like us or click on the link at kcsmradio.com. El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk. A lot of comments coming in there, including from Maria Coleman saying, like, give a shout out to the El Paso Fire Department. Came out and extinguished a large brush fire on July 4th. Stayed late in the evening to make sure the fire was out. The fire was due to careless use of fireworks by non-residents. The flames were behind mine and neighbor's house in an unattended Oreo. A windy evening may have resulted in a different result. They were just great. Glad you weren't. I'm glad it worked out that way. Not glad it happened by any means, but that situation was able to be resolved safely. And again, I'm sure there's plenty of fireworks left over in this community, particularly with the whole non-banning of them in the county, which I'm not saying I wanted to happen, but has not been the case in recent years. Given drought conditions, the county has usually moved towards it, but wasn't able to justify it this year due to the slightly less drought conditions. It's not that it was like actually wet or anything, but just not quite as severely dry was the way the rankings came down. But just be safe and be careful out there with this and any of the other holidays that are involved with it. We'll say also a lot of conversation about how we have conversation or calls and other things like that, including being accused of not having the huevos to entertain lunacy or things like that. Any case, principles only matter if you keep them around when it's difficult. If all you do is saying, oh, no, these are our principles and we stick by them, and as soon as it gets difficult, well, we can't do that now. Did you ever really have them? And one of the principles that this show was founded upon and we have maintained throughout is that we want to hear from the community in all of the different stripes. We're not here to push, agree, or, deny any particular viewpoint, but there's a couple of things that obviously we can't do, profanity being one of them, no matter how much it would just, oh gosh, if I got like one a day, like one choice F-bomb, oh, my blood pressure would probably be a whole lot less. It's not too bad right now, but I'm just saying the cathartic effect that would have, I can only imagine. But also, if you're here to not contribute, but to try to tear down everyone else, you can disagree with their logic, their reasoning, their points. In fact, I would encourage you to do so, even with myself. This is not a you have to agree with me kind of enterprise that we're doing here. But until we reach one of those egregious points here, we might be reaching it in some other ways. If I just said I don't like what this guy is saying, so therefore we're not going to hear from it anymore, that would not be holding to my own principles. So if you think that giving in and just saying, no, I don't want to hear from it, I don't want to, is a show of testicular fortitude, I don't want to see how you apply that to any other part of your life. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, getting back to the phone lines now. Again, that number to call, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have David in the Northeast on the line with us here right now. David, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Andrew. Now, because of your previous caller, it kind of took a little bit of a turn of what I want to discuss. Now, first of all, I said in comments before that that your radio show, I think of it, it's like a public town hall instead of a radio show where people can come together and talk about very important issues. I mean, isn't that the name of the show, Talk El Paso? So
exactly.
So again, I appreciate you being able to be on the air and have a reasonable civil dialogue with everyone. And first of all, I don't like labels. I mean, yes, I'm people who hear what I say, and possibly people who hear what you say on the show, they'll probably immediately label you, oh, he's a conservative or he's a right wing. I don't like those. I don't like labels, because again, when you have labels, you put in a box, and then people they think. See, that's the thing. People think just because like I'll often get worried all the time that people think just because I carry a gun or I'm a gun advocate that he supports Trump. He's for a lot of these right-wing maniac ideas that are far from my mind. But anyway, to get on with what I really called in to talk about.
Fair enough.
The realest, of course, the El Paso Walmart shooter. He's still on trial, and a lot of people are, they're probably wondering, what in God's name took so long. Now, now that surprises me a little bit. But what surprises me about the whole thing is that it's even got to be a discussion that he receives the death penalty. And what I really called in to say was that, see, it baffles me that somebody's got to go that extreme before anybody even considers the death penalty. Now, these days,
okay.
I mean, what I believe where a lot of crime is out of control is because there's no more deterrent like there once was. Now, I'm not saying bring back public executions and public hangings, but with the amount of forensics and with the amount of ways, scientific improvements that we have these days to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that somebody committed a murder in cold blood, I really believe the punishment there should fit the crime. And I believe a lot of that doesn't exist anymore. It seems a lot of times people who commit like horrific and violent crimes, they spend the rest of their life behind bars. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I've never been to prison or jail. I've never even been arrested, but I almost guarantee you it's not a fun place. Now, jokingly, I've had some people in Army basic training tell me that, oh, this is a little bit like jail, but we get paid for it, and they give us guns. But again, I can't relate to jail. That's just a joke somebody had told me. But regardless, I don't think that spending time in jail is a picnic. But regardless, I don't think that people who committed a heinous crime like that should be sitting up in a cell for the rest of their life, where we have to pay for that, taking up taxpayers' money. I really believe that if there's overwhelming evidence that you have committed a crime, especially murder, and there's no doubt that you killed this person. Now, I'm not talking about, self-defense cases where somebody is, because, that's a lot of times legal gun owners, when they have to do the unthinkable, which I guarantee you a lot of them who have been forced into that situation don't want to do that, but it's just, they were, because life happens. A lot of times, they get charged with murder. And I think maybe that's where we go wrong. Because a lot of people think that if we bring back executions and, sentencing comes down immediately, not where it's a trial for like years and years and years. They think, oh, it's not only it's wrong, but that you might find the wrong person guilty. But that happens anyway. I mean, again, it's just we're gonna have to trust hope that the person who's laying down sentence, the judge, the prosecution, that they make the right decision. And I truly believe if we bring back where the punishment fits the crime, especially with murder, I really believe that would definitely help the murder rate more than gun control. That's just my humble opinion. What do you think of all this, Andrew?
I mean, that's been a debate that it's certainly not a new one, but I mean, in our community, certainly has been reignited by this whole situation. And again, so for the process going through right now, not responding to you directly on this, but just for anyone who may be tuning in, what's going on right now with the admitted Walmart August 3rd shooter is that he is going to be facing probably about 90 counts of consecutive life sentences, and there's no possibility of parole in his case. Death penalty is not on the table in that one because of both the plea agreement that was made, but even before that point, due to basically federal rules in effect right now. I mean, it is an administration-based thing, but that's the way it's going to go. So the death penalty part that current caller is talking about is relating to what might be coming with the state trial, which, again, as our news partners at KFOX 14 said, not going to happen before next year at this point. There is a very much a zero chance of that. I'd be floored if it ended up moving before this. But what I will say is that on the idea of it, our justice system in general, both in any particular state and at the federal level, is based on the idea that, of course, we would rather that basically, I mean, innocent than proven guilty is the common one that's put forth, but another way it's been put to me by those that have been long involved in legal practice. I used to spend way more time than I do now down at like the county courthouse, never on trial for anything, never even made jury duty, which, by the way, I have some maybe coming up at the end of this month. We'll see how that affects programming as an aside, but covering it and talking with it, did mock trial back in the day, those kind of things. And the concept that essentially is one of the foundational concerns with our justice system is that we would rather let a guilty person go free than apply a punishment to an innocent person. Now, that's the ideal. That's the way it should work. And of course, it doesn't. I mean, there's things out there like the Innocence Project and other like DNA evidence that has been going through to try and find things like that of where people have had, well, essentially things and all, confession cases, all these types of aspects that color the issue of how do we apply justice. And that's one of the reasons that the death penalty has had some of the pushback on it, kind of like what you're referring to there on the idea of putting an innocent person to death, even if there is evidence of it, that it's shown there and that there's gone through the trial process, the thought that an error could have been made or something been done incorrectly or justice not served definitely gives, I think, rightly so, plenty of people, particularly those in elected positions and otherwise, and just in the community, pause, because that concept, and particularly of the, well, could that happen to you? And that's really one of the major questions that comes down to justice now, isn't it? Of if you were to be in this system, if this were to be applied to you for whatever circumstance, because anyone can be accused of a crime, whether you did it or not. A lot of people think, oh, no, just don't do the crime, don't do the time. But that's not what our system's idea is in point. If we could just universally and unilaterally declare, okay, all the people who are guilty, this has happened to them, and know with 100% accuracy, I think people would be in favor of that, but we don't inhabit that system. We don't have that Minority Reports kind of sci-fi ability to do that. So we have the best ways of basically men and laws that is available in order to jury of the peers and all of that, but even then, it's not inherently unable to be flawed. There's plenty of ways that things can be done wrong, evidence withheld, confessions taken incorrectly, and just misprocessing of things. So that's one of the ideas that comes to it. And I also say, I remember back from my speech and debate days, I mean, going back to high school, this has been an issue of the way that the death penalty ends up being applied, because it's not okay, you've been accused of death, we'll take that out next week, like I think was demonstrated in a movie I think about and do like regular rewatching of sometimes. What is it? Starship Troopers, where sentenced to death. Yeah, sentence applied next day. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Looking at some of the more recent research on it, it would take appeals on the order of several years. There was a couple ones in a particular study I'm looking at. Justice delayed, time consumption, and capital appeals, a multi-state study from March of 2007. And that one looking at on order of, in some cases, decades to get through the appeals process. So they still do end up sitting in jail for quite a long time, and that's by no means an average in this case. Just looking at some of the executive summaries on that, because that's what I've been familiar with, that there's an order of decades because there is the appeals process. Because, again, we want to make damn sure as a society that we are not putting someone, particularly for capital punishment, to death without there being 100%. Again, the standard used in court is beyond a reasonable doubt, but even then, that's not quite sufficient, I would say, to most people's consciousnesses of saying that, well, yeah, we're pretty damn sure this guy did it. No, they want to be certain, and that's why we do have these appeals and these processes. So it's not a simple one. And also the costs involved with it. There's been stories over the years of the different drugs that are involved, particularly in the modern chemical ways that it's being done, the lethal injection being very difficult to maintain, and a lot of scrutiny on that. So this is all to say it is not a simple process. It should not be a simple process, I would also argue, but the way it applies in this case and how it moves forward, that's why I'm still going to be pretty careful in the way I use this language, because we are still looking at the possibility of this case being tried in this community. And if the death penalty is on the table, I would expect that this would be an actual, like, full defense case in that situation, because the plea agreement, death penalty not being a part of it. I think that's why sure, it took a while, but that's why it was able to, relatively speaking, given the situation, the delays already happened, move through pretty quickly, because you got to remember, there wasn't an actual trial. There was not a guilt or even, in a sense, determination part of this trial. There was a plea agreement, and sure, 90 consecutive life sentences is the result of that. So it's not exactly like getting off light, but if the death penalty is on the table, I at least at this point expect that there would be probably a pretty vociferous defense, and that could, and frankly, I would argue should, still be held in this community.
Agreed. I mean, again, that's why we talk about these issues, because
Sure.
they're not just, it's not just simply cut and dry. Like
Yeah.
you talked about Star Trek. First thing I think of is Western movies of
Sure.
he did it, and sentence will be carried out tomorrow, and then the next scene he's being hung by the neck until he's dead. But again, the times have changed, and it's not as
Certainly.
cut and dry as it once was. So I mean, there's a lot more bureaucracy and oversight and legality of it.
It definitely is, and times have certainly changed. Not going to say I was ever in favor. I mean, you're not talking about a lynching there, but oftentimes in those similar circumstances, that could be the way justice was at least considered to be carried out, even if it didn't end up being that way. So I'm in favor of there being, I think it should be difficult to kill someone in this country. I don't feel like I have any bones about that, because again, if you're not damn sure, be like as close to as feasible 100%, then it's unreasonable in my mind, because oftentimes also the process, the cost of it, as you mentioned there, ends up being pretty damn similar. I mean, the research I've looked at back when I was actively debating these issues is a decade or so old, so I'll have to update myself. But to my understanding, particularly in this current circumstance, it's actually can be more expensive to house, to execute someone than it is to house them for the duration of their lives. That's been some of the stats I've been aware at over the years. I'll have to find some more updated ones to give a better source citing on that, but those have been the circumstances in previous decades.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well, Andrew, thanks for taking my call, and God bless you and your listeners, and everybody who everybody who's out to do good, and hey, justice for all.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, appreciate the point in the call. Thank you for it, and have a good one there.
Have a good evening.
All right, with that, well overdue for this next break. We got more calls in line. We'll squeeze in what we can as we get towards the end of this program here. We've dealt a lot of heavy stuff, as I fully expect we will this week, and we're definitely planning on. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Again, that number, 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 news update. The first day of the federal sentencing hearing for the El Paso Walmart shooter Patrick Crusius got underway in downtown El Paso today. There were gasps and immediate crying when Crusius entered the courtroom. Crusius was wearing a blue jumpsuit and orange shoes. He was sitting next to his attorney, Joe Spencer. Crusius was handcuffed and shackled. This afternoon's session started with the victim's impact statements. The gunman is facing 90 federal consecutive sentences. He is still facing the possibility of the death sentence in the state trial, which isn't expected to start until next year. The Sunland Park Fire Department says a man in his 20s had burn injuries to his face and hands after setting off a firework. A neighbor says the man had picked up a firework when it went off in his hand. Also, El Paso fire crews responded to several brush fires that were caused by fireworks. This has been your KFOX 14 news update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
El Paso freeways continue to look good this afternoon with no major crashes. Gateway West at Trowbridge, an accident reported with a medical unit on the scene. An accident reported northbound Rich Beam at Zaragoza. And El Paso Fires responding to a Condition 2 fire. It's a house fire at the 10,000 block of Preston Drive. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From the CBS 4 Weather Center, this is meteorologist Evan O'Regan. Very good Wednesday morning to you all. We have a heat advisory that's going to go into effect for the borderland starting at noon today. For those excessively hot temperatures that we're going to be seeing, our high today is around 105 in El Paso. Under partly cloudy skies, and those temperatures are only going to go up from here. We could potentially get up towards that 110 degree mark as we go into the weekend and early next week as we get a new high pressure ridge coming into the area. From the CBS 4 Weather Center, this is meteorologist Evan O'Regan.
This report is sponsored by Wendy's Late Night, open until midnight or later. Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
For the local issues and discussion you won't get anywhere else, turn to Talk El Paso. Weekdays at 4 right here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Brought to you in part by the El Paso Community Foundation. Sound off on what matters to you. Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. And let's talk El Paso.
Hi, I'm Burt Ward, Robin from TV's Batman, inviting you to feed your dog natural, non-GMO, Gentle Giants dog and puppy food. Dogs eating Gentle Giants and following our special feeding and care program are living as long as 27 healthy, active years with a wonderful quality of life. Holy wow, 27 years! Think of all the extra years you could enjoy with your dog at Target, H-E-B, and stores near you. Try Gentle Giants cat and kitten food, too.
The teacher said she was daydreaming. Stacy, he is extra sensitive, and there is no in-between for him.
Are you wondering why your child is struggling? It might be a sign of a learning or thinking difference like ADHD or dyslexia. Some kids are wired differently, but all kids can thrive with the right support. Talk with your pediatrician to find answers and explore solutions. The American Academy of Pediatrics and Understood.org are here to help. Visit understood.org/iHeart for tools and resources.
Shopping for new blinds? At Blindster, we offer over 50 different blinds, shades, and shutters at low prices, custom made for your windows, and shipping is free. And right now, save 50% off any order during our July 4th sale. Blindster.com.
This report is sponsored by Blindster.com.
Freedom of speech lives here.
To me, freedom of speech is being able to say anything you want.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, and a lot of comments going on there. Also, those, of course, dropping those likes and reacts that we do appreciate, such as Ion Graham Banda, RJ Promotes, James Holmes, Flaco Jimenez, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Ida Beza Gardner, and Angel Rueda. Do appreciate all of that as we try to get to most of the conversation we can. Squeezing in the calls we can here at the end of this segment. We're getting close to the top of the hour. 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. A couple of other comments coming in there, including Ronaldo Rivera saying, we know the shooter committed the crime. The question is, what was his state of mind? And from that there, Austin Redfern asking, I wonder if the shooter can get a reduced sentence, life instead of death. Speaking again of the state trial here, continuing on with Austin comment, if he pleads and claims temporary insanity. I mean, I've looked at some stats in previous years, I haven't looked at them more recently, that of any kind of insanity defense that has been applied, a lot of people think, particularly like from popular media, television shows, procedural cop dramas, those kind of things, that it's an automatic, get out of jail free or get into a psych ward instead of jail free card kind of thing. But I think that the actual success rate of that, at least when I looked at it previously, is like sub 5%. And I want to say sub 1%, but I'll have to find more recent sources on that one. But on the issue of execution, RJ saying, I think I heard something about bringing back the firing squad. No joke. I do believe that has been possible. Or gas chambers, potentially. There's also been talk of the electric chair because of issues with sourcing of the chemicals that go into the lethal injection. Of course, the sticking point there is a cruel and unusual punishment and those clauses within the Constitution, and that if there is undue pain or suffering caused as part of it, it does not fit that. That's been another part of how the Supreme Court cases that have surrounded this have been focused on. So anyway, get into at least one last call or so before we get to the end of the program here. We do have Raul in the Northeastern line with us here right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. I heard you mention principles. I remember Republicans used to say they had principles. That was before they abandoned them to join Trump's cult. Now, I'd say right on to all that Eric had to say. I'll put him up against mendacious Mike anytime. The death penalty is not a deterrent to a madman who wants to die in a shootout with cops, okay? Now, I fondly remember 4th of July gatherings, celebrations, and fireworks displays without having to think about a mad shooter. In this America that Trump did not make great, this 4th of July weekend, there were 22 mass shootings in 17 states. 10 people were killed and 38 were wounded in mass shootings in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Fort Worth. You know, that made this weekend the weekend with the most mass shootings of any day this year. Am I next? Or one of my family members or friends? You know, is this what a well-regulated militia being necessary to a free state looks like? Is the nightmare that we've been suffering what the founders imagined the future of an armed citizenry would look like? You know, these tragedies, including the one that befell El Paso by a Trump-incited xenophobe and racist terrorist, reminded me of the gun nuts Pledge of Allegiance. We pledge allegiance to the gun and the divided states of America and to the plutocracy for which it yields, a divided nation under Mammon with liberty and justice for the few who can afford it and don't get shot. You know, Andrew, I don't want to go back to how it used to be. I want to progress to how it should be.
I won't disagree with you that this is a bad thing. And yeah, article title from our news partners at KFOX 14, 22 mass shootings in 17 states over July 4th holiday weekend, with the definition that they are using here. And according to the Gun Violence Archive, the standard being used here, classifying a mass shooting as an incident where 4 or more people, excluding the shooter, are killed or injured by guns. So people can see that story being referenced there over with our news partners again at KFOX 14. But okay, as much as I'm in favor of gun rights and as much as that's one I've been willing to talk about, the pledge you're suggesting there, frankly, anyone who ends up worshiping firearms has several major issues with their mentality and with the way they think about things. I mean, I very much come down on the side of a gun is a tool, and anyone worshiping it, and I've seen various kind of disturbing displays of like shrines or stuff being set up, which is not even just weird and bad, but completely missing the point. Because if you are saying that, oh no, this is, I mean, the concept of self-defense and self-determination are key and critical to not even just modern, but the history of this country. Some conversation going on earlier about if there had been someone, a responsibly armed American in that parking lot on that day, could things have turned out differently? That's a kind of like armchair, Monday morning quarterbacking for a situation no one could anticipate or reasonably predict in that circumstance happening, what happened in our community. Again, from someone coming to attack our community. And this is another reason that when it comes to the rhetoric on this, I fully oppose the invasion ideology. But tell you what, I'm probably going to have to reference that more specifically tomorrow, as we will be talking further about immigration tomorrow here on the program. But anyone who says that, no, I mean, like the whole, old played out, cold dead hands kind of mentality of it. I mean, at a certain point, anyone saying that, no, you don't deserve guns, but then the whole conversation of, well, I get armed security and you don't, making it essentially a resources issue and not a rights issue is a little bit messed up from its outset, saying, rules for thee, but not for me, which is often a issue when it comes to governance in this country. Got other issues with them up there as well, including some interesting bills involving effectively insider trading, but that's a separate issue. But when it comes to the idea of self-defense, I mean, most of those incidents, not knowing the details of all of them, but I'm going to say that it wasn't actually a part of it, nor the well-regulated militia that you often like to throw around as are you really doing this? Because that's why I use the phrase responsibly armed Americans. Because if you're not responsibly armed, and I mean, even it existed in our community after incidents like this, or during the midst of the pandemic and the time when people were saying like, well, I got to get ready. What if things go wrong? What if things get weird? What if there are, riots, looting, other things going on in our community? A lot of people thought, well, I'll get a gun and then I'll be safe. And I got to say, those people also do not fit under the definition I use of responsibly armed American. Because if you think that it'd be like buying a car, just buying a car and saying, yep, I'm a driver, we'd be like, well, wait, hold up. Do you have your driver's license? Have you passed a driving test? You taken defensive driving, anything like that? That's why I would encourage anyone who considers themselves or would like to consider themselves a responsibly armed American to go out, get training, know the machinery and the way and the laws involved with it. I mean, just like a car, traffic laws, if you don't know the self-defense laws of wherever you're going to be in or expecting to operate such a piece of machinery is, well, foolish at best and damn near irresponsible. Not even just at worst, but just at its very base proposition here. So if you're going to lump this in with a regulated militia, someone literally committing a crime when it comes to this? No. I'm going to answer that. No. Is it a good thing? And therefore I say, well, that's just the cost of doing business. Absolutely not. This should not be tolerable, nor should it be something that we just accept as a factor in this country. But if you're coming down on it as then, therefore, as often ends up being the conversation, we need to just get rid of them or ban them or anything like that, that ends up coming the next step of the conversation that we didn't quite get to today. The short answer there is also going to be no, because also, like, murder is already illegal in this country. But in terms of dealing with it and preventing it, there may be more that needs to be done in the way it's considered. Frankly, I'm in favor of training and requirements along those lines, though I can also understand people who have misgivings about that, given the immediate politicization nature that comes along with this, of people saying of, well, we're going to put it out of range. I mean, that's an argument that happened around the tax stamps themselves when it comes to the National Firearms Act and the registry that certain guns exist on these days, is not to make it illegal, just unavailable to the general rabble out there who just can't be trusted to handle that unless they have a certain amount of resources, which at its very best proposition, I also have serious issues with. But we're not going to solve that issue today. And in fact, we got to take that next break right now. So I appreciate the point and the call for what it's worth. And don't think I didn't miss the digs you got in there at the other parts of the audience. But we got to take that break right now. Tell you a little bit more about what we got coming up for you on the program after this break. So stay tuned. We're Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Heavy congestion southbound on the 110 near the port of entry has got traffic backed up on the exit ramp back to Alameda. Northbound on the loop in the East Valley at Iron Medics, a stalled semi is blocking the right shoulder. A couple of crashes reported, one eastbound on Montana Avenue at Saul Kleinfeld and another in the East Valley, northbound Rich Beam at Zaragoza. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Wendy's Late Night, open until midnight or later. Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Every day, you breathe in thousands of tiny little germs, allergens, and viruses. Don't let these invisible invaders make breathing through your nose impossible. Flush them out with Navage. I'm Martin Hoke, and I invented Navage to make cleaning your nose easy. Navage uses powered suction to pull saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, helping flush out everything that makes you miserable. Nearly 4 million people use Navage to breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier. People like Doug, a verified Navage user who writes, I had difficulty for years breathing through my nose. After using Navage, my whole breathing has changed. My sinuses don't hurt and no more stuffy nose. It's an amazing product. Unquote. If you suffer from sinus congestion, allergies, or snoring, then Navage is the safe, drug-free solution you've been looking for. Navage is at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Target, and Navage.com. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E. Clean nose, healthy life.
News Radio 690, KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here and having joined us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may have been doing so. A couple of things we got coming up for you on the show. Again, short week, effectively, with the July 4th holiday now concluded. And don't be blowing yourselves up out there anymore or setting other fires. Please don't be doing that. But a couple of things we got coming up for you. Again, I'm going to be talking with Bob Moore, founder of El Paso Matters, best way to put it, about the recent article about the Darien Gap and what it means for immigration, not even just along the entire border sector, but here in El Paso as well. We go in depth on that. That'll be the subject for us tomorrow. And in that conversation, I didn't really get to it about the whole phrase invasion and my personal opposition for it and why we cover things the way that we do. We'll talk about that tomorrow on the program, and that'll take us right into Friday. And I'm sure this will be an interesting one overall. Let's just put it that way. So, again, that'll do it for us for today. Super out of time. So I want to thank everyone that did tune in, call in, comment, participate in the show. If you actually want to talk about the issues, if you're here just to beat up other people that you disagree with or slander them more specifically, no. But if you want to talk about the issues that affect us in the borderland, we'll be here as we are every Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. So until then, until next time, I want you all to stay safe out there, look twice for motorcycles when out on the road, and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Heavy congestion southbound on the 110 near the port of entry has got traffic backed up on the exit ramp back to Alameda. Northbound on the loop in the East Valley at Iron Medics, a stalled semi is blocking the right shoulder. A couple of crashes reported, one eastbound on Montana Avenue at Saul Kleinfeld and another in the East Valley, northbound Rich Beam at Zaragoza. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working. Who, me? Text and whatever, just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Most of the time, traffic is pretty good. But there are times when traffic can be pretty bad. No, I mean like really bad. Almost, but more like an asteroid's gonna hit the city and everyone's trying to get out of town at once and nobody's car is moving and people are running down the highway clutching their kids and whatever belongings they can grab. Yep, now you got it. It's times like these you need your severe traffic station. Traffic and weather all day. Stay informed with El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News on the hour and the half. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre says a judge in a federal court decided to limit the Biden administration's communications with social media companies.
We certainly disagree with this decision. The DOJ is reviewing this.
Republican states have sued the administration, alleging it colluded with social media sites to censor unfavorable views related to issues like the COVID pandemic and elections. The judge issued a sweeping preliminary injunction barring numerous federal officials and agencies from having any contact with social media firms for the purpose of removing First Amendment protected speech. There was at least 17 mass shootings across the country over the 4th of July weekend that left as many as 18 people dead. That's according to data published by the Gun Violence Archive. 3 people were killed in a shooting in Fort Worth, 5 were killed by a gunman in Philadelphia, and 4 were killed in Louisiana late Tuesday night. The Pentagon will make changes to how military personnel access classified information following a massive leak of top-secret documents earlier this year. An internal review of policies concluded the Defense Department should improve its security posture and accountability measures.